So, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I am Paul Morrow on the ops desk as ever. And today we have the great Brianna Lyman. You've seen her on the network. You see her work. She writes for the Federalist. We have a school in common. We're both Fordham graduates. I went to Fordham Law. She was Fordham undergrad. So we share an alma mater. But we're very pleased to have her here because we want to get the Gen Z perspective on everything that's going on, and nobody better than her to convey. So, Brianna, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
We appreciate you being here. So, look, I got to go to some very, dark stuff here because obviously we've all seen the video now. I was out in Utah. Fox had me out there for a few days reporting on the ground about the Charlie Kirk situation. Let's talk just personal first, and then we'll make it general. But how did you find out about this? Where were you, and what did you see?
Yeah, this was just, it's been a horrible week for all of America. I was actually heading on to the Charles Payne show on Fox Business on Wednesday when I got a call that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And I tell Charles Payne, at this point, Fox News wasn't even aware of it. They weren't broadcasting it, at least, is what I mean. And by the time we finished our segment, I got a call from a friend who had sources and said, unfortunately, we're hearing Charlie Kirk was actually killed. And that was just the most devastating moment. I tell Charles Payne, he just looked distraught. We were all in shock. We were praying that my information was wrong. Unfortunately, it wasn't. And it's just been a really tough week. I did not know Charlie personally, and I regret to say that. But Charlie's impact on my generation has been so undeniable because he felt like a team captain. We felt like we could win any game with Charlie on our side. And someone took that from us.
Well, I see that's an analogy I haven't heard, a team captain. That's actually very, very insightful. So, like, I have to ask you, you never met him. I only met him. My recollection is I met him once, one time, come out of the green room at Fox, and I wasn't even sure. I had to ask somebody, is he very tall? They said, yeah. I said, yeah, I do remember meeting him. He's very gracious. It was a quick interaction. But I have to ask you, did you follow him? Did you follow TPU? Were you, like, aware of his stuff? Like, how'd that go?
Oh, yeah. I've been a fan of Charlie since he pretty much came out. I think 2018 is probably when I began hearing of him. And then it was in probably 2021 that I started watching a lot of his videos.
So, Brianna, obviously, he was a really influential figure for your generation. How did you personally, specifically, come to him? Like, did you just see him online? Did you get an email? Like, how did you find Turning Point?
Yeah, Turning Point, or Charlie Kirk, actually, he became more prominent 2018, 2020 to me. I was part of the college Republicans at Fordham University, and we were always looking for someone that we could look up to. And one of my, fellow classmates had mentioned him. We started kind of getting acquainted with the videos he was posting, with the message he was sending. And over the past few years, obviously, he ballooned. And it was really important in particular, I think, post Black Lives Matter riots. Charlie was the voice that no other Republican was willing to be. Nobody was able to confront the facts the way Charlie does. Nobody was willing to confront the facts the way Charlie does. And he inspired my generation to do what the Republicans of my parents' age wouldn't do, and that is fight for our side.
So that had to be like a really unique voice because, as you and I both know, especially in New York, you're from the New York area, I assume.
Yes.
So, because you're on a network, so obviously you come into the studio, you have to be nearby, like me, and you know, in this area, it actually takes a decent amount of guts. Now, it's easy for me. I just, I get in the car, I go to the studio. But for somebody like you who was on campus
Mhm.
and to say, look, hey, I was involved in the college Republicans. I mean, I admire that. It took guts. Was it a hostile atmosphere for your generation to be somebody who was right leaning?
Not at all. And Fordham was one of the worst spots. Granted, we were in New York City, so you kind of expect the teachers to be liberal. But I was interning for the Trump campaign back in 2018, I believe this was. And I decided to skip a day of class with a note from the Trump campaign saying I wouldn't be there because I was meeting Mike Pence. Nobody would turn down the opportunity to meet a sitting vice president. And unfortunately, my teacher, who was far left, was extremely angry and upset about it. And she accused me of manipulating a medical note I had for a private disability that I used to get out of class twice before the entire semester.
Wow.
Fordham ended up requiring more medical documentation. My doctors were like, this is harassment. Finally, my parents had to get involved. They threatened to sue Fordham for harassment. They immediately backed down, of course, because it wasn't about my medical note. It was politically charged. So it was a really tough time to be a conservative on campus.
And Charlie is the one who made it okay to say, no, I don't agree with you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what it was. Charlie made it okay. He also made it cool to be a conservative. And I think in the past year and a half in particular, we have seen conservatism be cool. It's why, what was it, the New York Magazine, I think, or the New Yorker came out with the Cruel Kids Table magazine cover after the inauguration.
Yeah.
They hate that Republicans and conservatives are back in trend.
I saw that, and you're right. That was like they were really biting their lips, and of course it was quite snarky, etc. And I hear you about Fordham because it's a Jesuit school, and for on the Catholic side of things, the Jesuits are far, far left. At Fordham Law, I used to have a joke with my wife what the over/under was as to at what point the law professor, how many classes in the professor would start denigrating the police. My number was usually three classes, and I generally won. It was usually pretty immediate. I never told them that at the time. I was already a cop. I was going at night, and I always kept that to myself. So I want to advance the story here a little bit. Charlie had made it cool for your generation to lean right. I'm sure it was a cognitive opening for a lot of people who normally never would have even considered such a thing. Of course, I have to be to the left. I'm in New York. I'm going to school here in New York on college campuses. That's what you got to be. All of a sudden, here comes this guy. Have you heard any reaction among your former classmates in the milieu of college? Because you're not that far out, you're quite young. Have you heard any reaction to his death? And is there any feeling of sort of stepping back and saying, you know what, left, right, center, we can't be shooting each other?
I actually, unfortunately, think the reaction, at least that I've seen and from people I did go to college with, has been Charlie Kirk shouldn't have been killed, but he's
But,
XYZ.
right.
And that's what's been so extremely hurtful because they're justifying his murder by saying, yeah, violence is bad, but he did say some stuff that deserved for him to be killed. And what's extremely frightening about that is Charlie spoke about God, family, country. Those are things that you and I speak about, that millions of Americans speak about. And if Charlie Kirk, a private citizen, could be murdered for God, family, country, any of us can. And to see people justifying that violence is extremely frightening because it means we have targets on our backs too.
Is anybody pushing back?
There's been, the problem is there's not enough pushback. I was on CNN recently, and we had this exact same debate. And what the leftist panelists failed to acknowledge is that maybe it's just a bunch of random people on social media. Tyler Robinson was a random kid too. We have to take seriously these random people who are on social media celebrating the death, cheering the death, or justifying the death, because that creates a culture of violence. And if the left refuses to acknowledge that, we're only going to see the cycle continue.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's it. I was on the five yesterday. I was talking about exactly this. I was saying there is an ecosystem on the left that is so self-serving. The problem is it's well funded. If you
Yes.
dig deep enough, you're going to find all kinds of money going into these groups that pay for the protesters. It makes the whole thing look bigger than it is. That attracts more people. They know what they're doing. And I would argue that there's even going to be some foreign funding in there once we peel back the layers. And it sounds like the Trump administration is going to. But you're right. The pushback, especially online, is really not there enough. And this kid's a very good example. Robinson, I'm sure it's going to come out. We know he was involved in Discord. That's a gaming platform, so we can't blame them. But there is undeniably, somebody described him as a quote unquote Reddit kid.
Mhm.
And, I think that's going to end up being very much I know it's sort of a pseudonymous way to capture a lot, but I think you're really going to find that this kid was led down the dark path here by the forums he was in because there was something missing in real life.
Yes.
And we used to call it loser to lion in the terrorism world when I was doing terrorism cases. You'd have these people who were leading these slipping down lives, and they were looking for some sort of purpose, something in life, and they would find this sort of cognitive aperture, that is, the bad guys would, and they would just get in there with that ideology. You can be a lion for jihad, for ISIS, etc. And the next thing you know, you've weaponized a very low rent operation. If you're
Mhm.
sitting overseas in Syria, Iraq, Iran, very low rent operation to do this to these kids. And I see a lot of parallels. I feel like there's a lot of parallels here. And I really, really hope that we go down deeper into what's causing all of this because you're right. You're seeing all of this. Yeah, Charlie Kirk, but, and don't you get the feeling, let me draw all this into a question. Don't you get the feeling that all of these people who are saying, yeah, but, don't know anything about what Kirk really was about. That really never heard him, and really, you see so many myths about him. They're all wrong. Am I out of line here?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. In fact, if you look at the evidence that we at least have now from this alleged assassin, it appears that he hated Charlie Kirk because of Charlie Kirk's stance, or what he believed Charlie
Right.
Kirk's stance was on transgender gays. If you actually listen to the literal hundreds of hours of available footage from Charlie Kirk, go through his tweets, his podcasts, he was the most kind and caring person. When he had people come up to the Prove Me Wrong tents, there was one girl, I watched a clip. She said she was on hormones. She asked when he thinks is a good time for people to be allowed on hormones. He wasn't demeaning. He didn't slander her. You know what he said? He said, "My prayer for you is that you can come to love the body and the person that you were born as, not the ones that your doctors are trying to help turn you into." That is not a
Mm.
man who hates transgender people, who hates gay people. It's a man who wants them to find their way. He said that if you don't welcome gay conservatives, you're not MAGA. He was extremely welcoming. And so, unfortunately, a lot of people, maybe even the alleged assassin, they had such a twisted, warped, and untrue view of Kirk that drives their hate towards Kirk. And
Mm.
that is a direct result of how the media covers Republicans. They've covered
Mm.
all of us as fascists, Nazis, Hitler. Charlie Kirk has been the same. They never covered him honestly. And that dishonest coverage creates a culture in which people think that Kirk, Trump, Republicans need to be taken out because they are threats to democracy, the whole nine.
Yeah, they forget the libertarian aspect of the right, which is, look, consenting adults, you can do what you want. We're not going to get in the way of that. Even if you disagree with the idea that transgenderism is a thing, because historically it's been about 0.0001 of the population is actually diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Now all of a sudden everybody in Hollywood has three transgender children. But aside from that, most of the right doesn't care. It's just like gay relationships. We just don't care. And that's why you're seeing so many gay people, traditional gay people, for lack of a better term, coming over to the right. Half of Trump's, look at Scott Bessent and all the other people in the Trump administration. It's amazing. They'll call Trump homophobic. And he's surrounded by all these kids. Completely ridiculous. But it just goes to the idea that they need this lever to hold
Mhm.
on to power. We have to be transphobic. We have to be anti gay, racist, Islamophobic, all the phobics, because that's their power silo and they're losing it. That's why, as everybody on the network has discussed, I'm sure as you have, blacks and Hispanics are voting on the right far more than ever before. And that's why they just completely missed that. And I just hope that we get this message out there because the myths bouncing around about Charlie are just so wide of the mark. And I got to tell you, I was not as hyper aware of his influence as I am now. It was kind of sort of below the radar. And then when this happened, I started hearing from people in my life, young people, and I was shocked. They knew everything about him. He was so influential. So let me ask you this. Who takes over? Because you're going to need one person. TPU has to keep going. You hearing anything? You see anybody in the landscape out there? Is it you? Is it somebody else I know? Who's going to take over TPU to continue Charlie's work? Because somebody has to. And old guys like me can't do it. We don't have the energy or the reach. Go ahead.
Yeah, someone definitely needs to continue his work, but no one can, and I know you're not insinuating this, no one can obviously replace Charlie. And I
He
think that,
built it, of course.
yeah, and I think that's going to be the tough task. We have a lot of great people on our side. We have people like Matt Walsh, we have people like Ben Shapiro, Jack Posobiec. These are extremely smart individuals. But at the end of the day,
Too old. Too old.
they're
Those
older. Yeah,
they're all good. I subscribe to the Wire, but those guys are too old.
they're older. They're older. And what Charlie did better than anybody else is Charlie made you feel like he legitimately was willing to listen to you, and he had the pulse of the younger generation because he was pretty much part of the younger generation. A lot of these other people, they have young children. A lot of my generation, we don't have young children yet, right?
Sure.
Charlie Kirk, even though he had young children, he was still super young. I also think what Charlie Kirk did better than anyone else is he was willing to talk to people he disagreed with and let them finish speaking. He was willing to
Right.
hear them out. We need someone who's
Oh
willing.
yeah.
I'm really looking forward, honestly. His wife, Erica, seems to be extremely intent on continuing her husband's legacy. And I trust her to be the guiding light of who would be the next best person that we could look to because she knew her husband best. She knows who is the best person to help carry his legacy forward with her.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And obviously she knows the operation. She's, very, very marbled into it all. And of course, everybody trusts her on this because of who she is. God bless her. Shapiro is close. All right. I don't know him. I never met him. Ben is close, but he's got his own thing going, and it's very influential as well. And by the way, I hope he's got adequate security because he operates in a similar space. But Charlie had more reach in with young people. And I'm going to say something else here. In lieu of Charlie, who was unique and who was the person who built all of this, if you're talking about TPU 2.0, my own opinion, this is Paulie talking, I think you need a woman. I think it would be beneficial to have a young woman because, as we all know, young white women are the most reliable leftist demographic out there in terms of how they vote, etc. And I think it would be good to break that logjam with a young woman. What do you, and I know I'm not asking you to take it on, but I'm just saying, like, what are your thoughts? Do you think that's a good strategy?
Well, I think that's interesting. And I do think, look, if we look at the 2024 election cycle, Charlie Kirk really did help shift young
Oh,
men.
yeah.
So now it is up for us to shift young
Yeah.
women. Charlie was already doing that. He hosts the Young Women's Leadership Summit and he has a bunch of female speakers come. But a lot of the young girls there, I'm sure, would tell you, while having a woman who's involved is great, I still think that Charlie was resonating with young women precisely because he was giving them an opportunity to embrace their femininity. A lot of men today are scared to encourage women to embrace their femininity, to embrace traditional gender roles because they're scared of being called that. And he also said, look, you don't have to be like this, but if you want to, it's a great thing. Read the gospel, it tells you more about this. Women actually like that idea. And a lot of people in my generation, women, are waking up to the fact that not all of us want to be career women. We want families, we want husbands, we want to raise a family and really be that backbone like generations before us. Charlie fostered an environment where we didn't feel ashamed to say that.
What a radical idea that it is somehow or other breaking the paradigm for women to live, choose to live in a way that has been their role since the beginning, for the last 5,000 years, since the beginning of civilization. Nobody is imposing that. But the trad wife idea has been so besmirched that, of course, there's a reaction against it. So I want to talk hard politics here because at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is we have to win. And Charlie is a big, big part of it. Reporting is, and I didn't realize it again until this awful incident, but I didn't realize how Charlie might have been so influential in Trump taking Arizona. We have to hold the midterms. You need this sort of thing to continue. So I have to ask you this. I'm going to ask you specifically, you personally. Do you get threats? Do you get the kind of reaction? I know at the level that he has gotten, thank God. But do you feel intimidated to go out there and speak to groups? Do you speak publicly?
I do.
Okay. Do you get threats? Do you ever feel intimidated? Are people hostile to you?
When I'm speaking publicly, I actually recently just did a similar event to Charlie's, like a Prove Me Wrong event. I did it with Walkaway in Manhattan, and we had about 150 people who were there not to be our friends. They were shouting us down. I thankfully did not feel scared, but they were very unkind. They were very cruel, and they weren't willing to sit down and listen. And I think that's actually what separates Charlie from the rest of us. We can all try to be Charlie. We can all try to do what he did. Charlie had a way of commanding the audience so that they wanted to hear him, even if they disagreed with him. And as for the young vote, look, what Turning Point did in the 2024 election, especially with ballot chasing, that was absolutely instrumental to winning this election because Republicans who were willing to use mail in ballots sometimes weren't willing to actually send them in. It was up to people on the ground to encourage others. Hey, remember to turn your mail in ballot in. Charlie had people on the ground doing that, encouraging that, explaining to people the best options for voting. We need to keep our foot on the pedal that same way. Charlie did it for younger generations. We need to do that for younger generations. And we need to make sure that Turning Point continues that specific mission no matter what.
So let me shift gears a little bit because you mentioned Manhattan and you're talking about New York. It looks like we're going to get Zoran Mondani as the next mayor of New York City. Now, an old timer like me who's been around, I can remember some of the mayors of my childhood who were not quite cut from the same cloth. They were more the de Blasio cloth, but Mamdani is a new thing. We've never had in New York City, to my recollection, I know New York City history quite well. We've never had one who was out there who says outright, I'm a socialist, and really kind of dog whistles, I'm a communist. You know, we've had people that are close, but we've never had people that have really gone as far as he has. And it's your generation, right, who's going to put him in. Now, I'm assuming, you don't know just conservatives. You're from the New York area. You have a wide circle of friends, I'm sure. Are these people really hopeful that he is going to flip a switch and everything is going to be affordable in New York?
Yes. And I think the reason, I don't think any of these people have Marxist convictions, but I think they misattribute the ills of corporatism to capitalism. And
Mm,
so when Mamdani, a socialist, says capitalism sucks, they say, yeah, he's right. He's going to tear down capitalism and things will get better. They don't realize that a lot of the big corporate bailouts, right? The Wall Street bailout, government intervention is a function of corporatism and is very similar to what socialism is, i.e., government intervention. And when it comes to socialism, it is a problem of our education system that there are so many people in America who believe that socialism either has worked or will work. Socialism rests on the idea that there are no natural rights. Our entire foundation is from natural rights, right? Rights that come from God, not the government, and cannot be taken away.
right.
Property is one of those natural rights. And if you don't have the right to have property, you don't have the right to any of your labor, any you want to buy, anything you want to sell. We're not a free person. The founders were extremely explicit on this. Mamdani rejects that, which means he rejects the founding. And if you reject the founding, you are unfit to hold office in our republic.
Well, he's about to hold office in our republic, and it's going to be very interesting. He's backed off a little bit about the idea of government run grocery stores. He's talking about, well, no, no, I only meant one per borough. Now they're going to crash and burn spectacularly, and then he's going to have to pull out of those because it's never worked. And, my question was, and I said it kind of tongue in cheek, everybody thought it was fine. I think it was on the five outnumbered or something. But, you know, the question that comes to my mind in light of his policies is, will we be allowed to shoplift from government run stores, grocery stores, because he doesn't want to prosecute any of those lower level things. So realistically, what he is saying is you need it, go in and take it. You and I both know that all that really means is everything is going to be shifted. It's going to be a tax burden. There's going to be all sorts of unfunded mandates. He's going to have to find the money someplace. I don't see how this can succeed. And now, of course, you've got all of the traditional Democrats with no spine endorsing him. We had Hochul come out, I think it was yesterday or the day before. Now our governor is saying that she's going to endorse him. I actually think that this could be the end of her campaign. She's tight already with some of the candidates. When Mamdani crashes and burns, she owns the fact that she endorsed him. I think there's a good chance that that could be the beginning of the end of the Hochul years. We should be so lucky. We're running out of time. I really wanted to get your perspective on all of this stuff from a young person who's going to have to deal with all of this. Tell us a bit about what you look. If you're sitting where I am, right? A New Yorker, my whole life, all of that stuff. And now I'm out here trying to put myself out, fight the good fight. I've come out, obviously, out of the criminal justice and legal world. But we look to people like you because, a lot of us are getting to the point where even, Gen Xers, we're cycling out, and we're looking to folks like you to say, protect all of this, because if we end up going the route of Cuba, there's going to be nothing left to build on. So you mentioned the fact that you were out there with a different program from TPU in Manhattan. Tell us about what you're doing. What is Brianna doing? Aside from being on the network and fighting the good fight, what are you doing that's forward looking that we can look to see you trying to right the ship?
I do think public speaking is really important. I do a lot of public speaking for my local conservative party, for the state conservative party, for Walkaway, which is Brandon Strock's organization. They're a great organization because
Right.
at the end of the day, the best way to get voters to shift is to change their minds. And a lot of people will say, but you're only changing one person's mind. There are races that are decided by 4 votes, congressional races. If you can change 4 people's
Yeah.
minds, and Charlie was the best at this. He went out there to change the hearts and minds. So I think that's something that all conservatives should actually have the impetus to do more so now that Charlie's gone, to honor his legacy and to make sure the movement he started, which is a massive shift to the right for the entire country, does not end with his physical death.
Were you down there at Union Square that day? They had the walk away
Yes,
event.
I
Were
was.
you there? You know, I was going to go to that, not to speak. Nobody asked me to speak. I just wanted to go to support. It rained like hell, and then I was going to go anyway, but I got a call. I had to go into the network. I hope they do another one of those because I want to go down and represent. In fact, a buddy of mine was called me up and said we should go do this thing just to show up and support. I think they're important. It's the belly of the beast, but I hope people are careful because there's a lot of nuts out there, and this is New York. And Brianna, they feel it slipping away.
Yeah, it is.
That's why they're reacting the way they are. They feel they had through the teachers union, they had the kids.
Yep.
This is not supposed to be happening according to the Marxist playbook. And they feel it's slipping away. They feel people like you. That's why what you're doing is so important. That's why what Charlie did was so important, because without an opposing voice, it becomes a fait accompli. But they see it. They see that it's slipping away. And that's why they are reacting the way they are. Let's end on something optimistic and positive. I'll give you the last word. Where do you think it's going? What should we be doing as per Brianna Lyman?
I am still optimistic. I think Charlie Kirk was always hopeful for the future of this country, and we should be. I think that you see a rise in religion among young people. People are coming back to their faith. America was created for religious people. John Jay, the rest of the founders, they spoke about that. That is extremely encouraging. I'm also encouraged by the fact that Democrats are doing horrible with voter registrations. Nobody wants to become a Democrat. People want to become a Republican. So Charlie Kirk's movement is still going on. There's still work to be done to make sure it doesn't somehow turn the opposite way. But this isn't the end for the Republican Party, and we will make sure Charlie Kirk did not die in vain.
I hope a guy like Scott Pressler, who's out there canvassing for votes, I hope a guy like him has security, and I hope he is supported. Let's just end with where people can find you. Where do we find your writing? Where do we find your appearances?
Yeah, you can find my writing at thefederalist.com. You can find me on Twitter at Brianna Lyman 2, or you can find me on Instagram where you can watch my clips at Brianna.Lyman.
Folks, Brianna Lyman, she's going to get mad at me for saying this. This is kind of the voice of a generation. We need people that are articulate on the right. You're laughing at me, I know, but there's not that many people who are willing to put themselves out there. They really are not, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming on. Brianna, Godspeed with everything you're doing. Thank you for coming on the Ops Desk. I'll see you on the network, and hopefully I'll see you again here.
Thanks so much, Paul.